You might be tempted to block him. And I get it. It feels final. It feels like power, like you're taking back control of a situation that felt out of your hands. After all, when someone disrespects you, hurts you, or walks away without looking back, your first instinct might be to slam the door shut. Digitally and emotionally. It's your way of saying, you don't get access to me anymore. But here's the thing, blocking him might bring you a sense of closure, but it doesn't necessarily make him regret losing you. In fact, in most cases, it just makes it easier for him to forget you altogether. What we're really craving when we go to block someone is emotional justice. We want them to feel the loss, the sting, the weight of what they've done. We think, if I disappear from his life completely, that will wake him up. That will show him what he's missing. But ironically, it often does the opposite. Because if he no longer sees you, hears from you, or gets even the smallest glimpse into your life, his attention naturally shifts elsewhere. And rather than reflecting on the void your absence creates, he adapts to it. Blocking is like tearing down a billboard you used to advertise your value. He might remember it was there, but it quickly fades into the background. There's no reminder of what he had, no trigger to reflect, no subtle nudge from the universe that makes him think, wow, she really is incredible. And I let that go. You vanish, and when you vanish too quickly, you take away the chance for him to confront what he gave up. I'm not saying you should stay connected to someone who hurt you or allow them access to your peace. What I am saying has been there's a difference between setting a boundary and disappearing to prove a point. Once the real strength isn't blocking someone out of frustration, it's choosing not to engage while still living your life in a way that quietly says, I've outgrown the version of me that tolerated this. Instead of blocking him, let him see the version of you that thrives without him. The one who laughs deeply, lives boldly, and doesn't need his validation to feel beautiful or worthy. Let him sit with the silence. Not because you cut him off, but because you no longer have anything to prove. You're not chasing, you're not reacting, and you're certainly not playing games. You're just living. And that kind of peace is loud. You don't need to slam the door to show your worth. You just need to stop waiting at it. Let him come to the realization on his own, without your interference, without your emotional reaction has been, and without the need to punish him by pressing block. Because if he's ever going to regret losing you, it won't be because you vanished. It'll be because you rose. And when he does finally look up, searching for that old version of you, he'll find that she's not there anymore. She's been replaced by someone stronger, someone radiant, someone unforgettable. Let your absence speak, but let your growth echo louder. There's something incredibly powerful about not reacting, about choosing silence over drama, growth over revenge, and self-worth over validation. When someone walks away or doesn't treat you the way you deserve, your response doesn't have to be loud to be heard. In fact, the most powerful message you can send is the one you never say out loud. The message that's written all over your life, your energy, your progress. This is where your glow up begins. And I'm not just talking about putting on a killer outfit and snapping a few new pictures for Instagram. Although, let's be honest, that never hurts. I'm talking about the kind of glow up that starts on the inside, the one that's rooted in healing, clarity, and a quiet kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. Here's the truth. When someone loses you, the real regret doesn't hit because you blocked them or sent a long emotional text. It hits when they see you rising, when they notice that you're not bitter, you're not broken, and you're certainly not sitting around waiting for them to come back. That stings. That makes them pause. That makes them realize they lost someone who didn't fall apart. They transformed. So instead of blocking him, work on becoming the best version of yourself. Not for him, not to make him jealous, but for you. Take the pain and turn it into fuel. Use that energy to build something extraordinary. Whether it's your health, your mindset, your passions, your career, your friendships. Let every part of your life become a reflection of someone who chose herself even when it hurt. That's the kind of transformation that makes people stop in their tracks. They see you walking into a room with more confidence. They hear the joy in your laugh. They notice how you're not trying to prove anything. You're just living. That's when the regret starts to creep in, because now they're not just missing who you were, they're missing out on who you've become. And what's beautiful about this process is that it's quiet. You don't need to post every step of your healing journey. You don't need to prove anything online. The people who need to notice will. They'll feel the shift. They'll see the lightness in your presence, the strength in your silence, and the peace you found in moving forward. When you focus on glowing up, you shift the dynamic. You take back your power without confrontation. You stop being the one who's reacting to their choices and start being the one who's choosing herself. Every single day. That changes everything. And eventually, the person who let you go will realize that the version of you they thought they knew is long gone. So no, don't block him. Let him watch. Let him witness your evolution. Let him feel the distance without you having to slam the door. You don't need to erase him from your world to heal. You just need to step into a world that no longer revolves around him. That's the moment he'll feel it. Not when you disappear, but when you shine. One of the most underrated moves you can make after someone hurts you or walks away is to stop broadcasting your emotions. To resist that urge to overshare, to vent online, to let them see the inner chaos you're feeling. It's not easy, especially when your heart is screaming and you want them to know just how badly they've affected you. But here's the truth: emotional mystery is one of the most powerful positions you can hold. The less he knows about what you're thinking, what you're doing, or how you're feeling, the more space there is for him to wonder. That wondering is what creates impact. When you don't react, don't explain, don't post a quote that's obviously aimed at him, it gets quiet. And in that quiet, something powerful happens. He starts to think. He starts to question. Is she over it? Did she ever care? Has she moved on? Those questions don't come when you're posting about how unbothered you are or constantly trying to prove you've leveled up. They come when you stop giving him front row access to your emotions. This isn't about playing games. It's about taking a step back and realizing that not everything deserves a reaction. Especially not from someone who didn't value you when it mattered. If you want him to feel the weight of losing you, you don't do that by trying to get his attention. You do it by becoming a little more unavailable, a little less predictable, a little harder to read. When he messages you and you don't reply right away, or at all, it sends a signal. When he checks your stories and sees you living, not performing, it hits differently. You're not trying to look happy. You are happy. Or at the very least, you're focused on rebuilding your peace and pouring into the life you want for yourself, not the life you had with him. And that's where real regret begins. When he realizes you're not chasing him, you're not emotionally entangled in his every move. You've detached not because you stopped carrying overnight, but because you finally started caring more about yourself. You've let go of the idea that he needs to see your pain to validate it. You no longer need his awareness to process your healing. That's where your power lies. People remember how they felt around you. If he remembers drama, arguments, or desperation, he walks away feeling justified. But if he remembers grace, strength, and an energy that quietly pulled back without bitterness, that sticks with him. Because it's rare. And when someone experiences something rare, they don't forget it. They come back to it in their thoughts, in their memories, and often in their regrets. So master the art of mystery, not to manipulate, but to elevate. Stop narrating your healing journey to someone who isn't even in the audience anymore. Let him wonder what you're thinking. Let him scroll and find nothing that gives him a clue. Let him sit with the silence you've created, not to punish him, but to protect your peace. Because the truth is, your detachment says more than any caption ever could. One of the most powerful shifts you can make after someone walks away or treats you like you're replaceable is to raise your standards and actually keep them there. It's one thing to say, "I deserve better," in the heat of the moment. It's another thing entirely to live like you believe it every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, because that's where real change happens. Not in what you tell other people you'll no longer accept, but in what you actually stop allowing. Let's be honest, it's easy to fall back into old patterns. You might tell yourself, "I've moved on," but then answer his message late at night. You say you know your worth, but you still over-explain, still chase clarity, still hope he might realize what he lost. The truth is, holding your standards isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. Clear on what you will no longer entertain. Clear on how you expect to be treated. Clear on the difference between someone who genuinely wants to grow with you and someone who just access to your energy without the responsibility of showing up for it. When you raise your standards, people feel it. Not because you shout it from the rooftops, but because your behavior changes. You stop justifying their actions. You stop making excuses. You stop being available to someone who couldn't even meet the bare minimum. That quiet shift in your energy, it speaks volumes. It says, "I'm not mad. I'm just unavailable for this version of love." And you know what's interesting? That's usually the moment they notice. Because before, they had access. They could come and go. They could give a little and take a lot. But now you've changed the terms. Now, the same effort that used to keep you around doesn't work anymore. Now they're dealing with a version of you that knows she can survive without breadcrumbs. And she's no longer willing to starve. This isn't about making them regret losing you by becoming cold or hard. It's about becoming solid, unshakable, has been. It's about creating a life where you're so rooted in your worth that anything less than respect, consistency, and effort simply can't stay. Because once you see your value, you can't unsee it. And once you start living like you believe in it, has been, the people who didn't rise to meet it either fall away or realize they've got serious work to do if they want back in. And that realization, that moment where they see you've leveled up emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, that's where the regret sets in. Not because you blocked them or tried to teach them a lesson, but because you stopped making space for their half-hearted effort. You outgrew the dynamic, and they feel the gap you've left behind. When you raise your standards and hold them, your life starts attracting different energy. Better conversations, more peace, deeper connections. And you become someone who isn't just hard to lose. You're someone they wish they'd never taken for granted in the first place, because nothing is more attractive than a woman who knows what she's worth and refuses to negotiate it. There's a quiet kind of power in staying calm. In a world where everyone is reacting, posting, venting, has been, and trying to prove they've moved on, the person who stays composed, who doesn't take the bait, who doesn't spiral into emotional chaos, that person stands out. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about choosing not to let someone else's behavior control your energy. After a breakup or emotional disappointment, it's so tempting to lash out. You want to say all the things you've been holding in. You want them to understand what they did, to feel the pain they caused. But more often than not, what we're really trying to do is force recognition, force accountability. And if you've ever done that, you know it rarely gives you the peace you're looking for. In fact, it usually leaves you feeling even more exposed, more exhausted, more frustrated. Now contrast that with this, you feel the emotions, but you don't act on them in the heat of the moment. You let the storm pass before you speak. You stop chasing closure from someone who didn't value communication when it mattered. You give yourself the space to grieve, to heal, and to process. Not in front of them, but within yourself. That level of self-control isn't weakness. It's strength in its purest form. There's nothing more magnetic than grace under pressure. When he expects you to be angry, bitter, or falling apart, and instead he sees a woman grounded in dignity, it shakes him, because that wasn't the reaction he prepared for. That wasn't the version of you he thought he'd left behind. And that's the version he can't stop thinking about. Being classy isn't about sugarcoating your truth. It's about choosing how and when to speak it, has been. It's about recognizing that some conversations don't need to happen because your silence already said enough. It's about knowing that healing doesn't need to be announced to be real. Some of your most powerful growth happens quietly, behind the scenes, when you're no longer focused on proving a point, but simply protecting your peace. When you don't react, you take away his power to define the dynamic. You stop playing the role he might expect you to play, the one who's always emotionally available, always trying to fix things, always looking for the right words to make it make sense. Instead, you become unpredictable in the best way. You become someone he can't read anymore. And that mystery becomes weighty. It lingers. It makes him wonder, did I really know her? Or did I only know the version of her that still hoped I'd change? Staying calm doesn't mean you're not hurting. The apology has been. It means you're choosing not to bleed where someone didn't bother to bandage the wound. It means you've stopped making noise just to be heard, and instead you're focusing on hearing yourself again. Your truth, your intuition, your worth. And when he sees you handling it with class, not throwing shade, not starting drama, not obsessing over his attention, it changes the narrative. He's no longer the one in control of how this ends. You are, not by force, but by your refusal to be emotionally dragged into a situation that no longer serves you. Because the woman who keeps her cool while everything around her is falling apart. That's the woman he'll think about long after it's too late. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing. No dramatic goodbye, no angry message, no last attempt to be understood, just silence. And I don't mean the kind of silence that's cold or calculated. I'm talking about a different kind of silence, the kind that comes from clarity. from strength, from knowing that your peace matters more than being right, more than being heard, more than being missed in a loud, obvious way. When someone hurts you or chooses to walk away, the urge to react is so human. You want them to feel what you're feeling. You want them to understand the damage, to recognize the weight of what they've done. But the truth is, the more you try to get that from them, the more you hand over your power, because needing someone to acknowledge your pain in order for it to be valid gives them too much control over your healing. Silence changes that. It puts the focus back where it belongs, on you, on your growth, on your next chapter. Instead of chasing a reaction or searching for closure in words they'll probably never say the right way, you find it in your own stillness, in the space you create to reconnect with yourself. And that's what people don't expect. They expect a response. They expect to see you break. When you don't give them that, it forces them to face something much more uncomfortable than your anger, your absence. Letting silence speak doesn't mean you're passive. It means you've chosen a different kind of power. You're no longer operating from emotion, but from self-respect. You're saying, I'm not going to explain myself to someone who chose not to listen when it mattered. That's a boundary. That's healing. And eventually, that's what hits the hardest. Because here's what happens as time goes on. They check in. Not always with words, but they look, they scroll, they wonder. And all they find is you quiet, not begging, not explaining, not performing, just living. And they realize they don't know what's going on in your world anymore. They don't know how you feel, what you're thinking, whether you've moved on. That uncertainty, it's loud. Louder than anything you could have said. We live in a time where people share everything. We overshare our wins, our pain, our healing journeys. So when someone pulls back and chooses intentional silence, it creates space. Space that used to be filled with emotion, with access, and with attention. And now it's just still. And that stillness makes room for reflection, for him to wonder, to question, to regret. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your healing. Not everyone should get to see the process. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply move on without making an announcement. Let your life speak for itself. Let your peace speak. Let your boundaries speak. Let the fact that you didn't chase, didn't react, didn't lower yourself speak, because all of that quietly says everything. You don't need to block him to make him feel your absence. You don't need to shout to be remembered. You just need to go and mean it. With no warning, no speech, and no performance. Because when your silence is rooted in strength, it echoes longer than any words ever could.